It was like stepping into another world, one where my name, my fears, and my heartbreak didn't matter. The house, nondescript from the outside, seemed to breathe with its own rhythm inside. Soft, amber lights bathed the rooms in a sultry glow, and the faint hum of music coursed through the air like an unspoken invitation. My heels clicked softly on the polished floors as I stepped further inside, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The faces around me blurred together at first, some smiling, others lost in quiet conversation. The room thrummed with energy, a pulse that seemed to echo in my chest. I didn't speak, didn't need to. The unspoken understanding here was liberating. I found the couch in the center of the room, a sprawling leather expanse that seemed to beckon. The fabric was cool against my skin as I sank into it, letting the weight of the evening settle over me. My fingers slid the straps of my dress from my shoulders. For a moment I hesitated, but the air seemed to thrum with permission. I let it fall. The first touch came softly, like the brush of a feather against my arm. My skin tingled where fingers grazed, a warmth that spread slowly, like liquid sunlight pooling under my skin. My breath caught as a second hand joined the first, tracing an invisible path along the curve of my back, igniting a flicker of heat in its wake. I let my eyes drift shut, letting the sensations bloom across my body. The boundaries of my mind blurred, narrowing to just this moment, this exquisite unraveling. Each touch was deliberate yet unhurried, as though the hands knew exactly what they wanted to say without words. Someone's lips grazed the inside of my wrist, soft and warm, the breath that followed sending shivers cascading up my arm. A hand slid to my hip, pressing gently but firmly, and I leaned into the touch without hesitation. Another pair of hands found the curve of my shoulder, tracing slow, lazy circles that made me melt deeper into the couch. I felt the faint weight of someone's breath near my neck, the warmth radiating like a promise. I arched slightly, instinctively, and was rewarded with a gentle press of lips just below my ear, their softness laced with a lingering heat. My pulse quickened, the room falling away until there was only this symphony of touches and whispers, skin and warmth. Time became a haze. Hands and lips moved over me, each touch coaxing new shivers from my body. I didn't need to see who they were. It didn't matter. Every stroke of a hand, every press of a mouth, was like a puzzle piece falling perfectly into place. It was a choreography without direction, each movement pulling me further into a realm I hadn't known I craved. At some point I stopped trying to make sense of it. I let myself be guided by the sensations, a wave I didn't want to resist. It wasn't about escape anymore. It was about surrender, about finding pleasure in the loss of control. I could feel my breaths grow shallow, each exhale trembling as fingers found new places to linger. The couch shifted slightly beneath me, the warm presence of another body replacing the emptiness at my side. A hand caressed the curve of my leg, a thumb brushing over the inside of my thigh with an agonizing slowness. I gasped, biting my lip as the sensation sent sparks shooting through my veins. "Just breathe," someone murmured, the words low and velvety, and I obeyed, letting the air flow into my lungs, rich and intoxicating. My head tilted back, the curve of my neck exposed to the room, and I felt lips trace its line, leaving a trail of heat that lingered long after they were gone. It felt endless, infinite, like I was suspended in a dream where touch was the only language. I didn't think about the world outside or the reasons that brought me here. All that mattered was this, a moment stretched so thin it felt eternal, fragile but utterly alive. I lost track of how many hands, how many touches passed over me. Each was unique, a new story whispered across my skin. And with every one, I felt myself slipping further into this realm of warmth and sensation, unmoored but unafraid. And for the first time in months I felt whole. I wasn't broken or lost. I was simply alive, each nerve in my body singing with a melody I hadn't known I was capable of hearing. And as I lay there, surrounded by strangers, I didn't care about the why or the how. I cared only about the now. Then it happened. Among the symphony of hands and whispers, I felt something warm, firm, and insistent press against me, entering me like the first stroke of an artist's brush on an untouched canvas. A low gasp escaped my lips, unbidden, and I felt a wave of sensation ripple through my entire being. It was like the world tilted, and for a moment I was lost in it, floating weightless. I didn't think about who or what or even why. All I felt was the rhythm, the movement, and the undeniable buzz that spread from deep within me, cascading outwards like electric waves. The tension of the past day evaporated, replaced by this connection. My head tilted back and I smiled, a soft, almost involuntary reaction to the sheer bliss coursing through me. The next minute, there was nothing but that buzz, that intoxicating high that made me feel utterly untouchable. My body wasn't just mine anymore. It was part of something larger, something primal and beautiful. I was so glad I'd come here, so grateful for the release I hadn't realized I desperately needed. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back to earlier today. It was 1 p.m. when my world fractured into pieces. My boyfriend and I had a fight. Not the kind of small spat you brush off with a kiss and an apology, but the kind that leaves deep scars and a heavy ache in your chest. He'd said things he shouldn't have, and maybe I had too. His words were sharp, cutting into me like jagged glass, and I found myself shouting things I didn't entirely mean. By the time the door slammed shut behind him, my face was streaked with tears, and my chest heaved with the weight of all we'd said, and all we hadn't. I went to my mom's house, seeking refuge like a child running to safety. She let me in without asking questions, her eyes filled with quiet concern. I buried my face in the couch cushions, crying into the fabric as I poured out everything. How he didn't understand me, how he could be so cruel, how much I still loved him even though I didn't want to. She listened as she always did, offering soft words of comfort that I barely heard. But her presence grounded me, giving me just enough space to let the storm inside me rage. I cried until my throat felt raw and my body ached from the effort. But even after the tears stopped, the ache remained. I needed something more than sympathy. I needed an escape. By late afternoon, the house felt too small, the air too heavy. I knew I couldn't stay there, not with the thoughts swirling in my mind. That's when I remembered the party. The invitation I'd ignored weeks ago flashed in my memory, promising a night of release and freedom. Normally, I would have dismissed the idea outright. But today I wasn't myself, or maybe I was exactly myself, stripped raw and desperate for something to take away the pain. Without telling anyone, not even my closest friends, I made the decision. I slipped into the sleek black dress hanging in my closet, the one I'd never had the courage to wear. My reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable, lips painted crimson, hair tousled, eyes glimmering with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. This wasn't about being someone else. It was about being someone I hadn't allowed myself to be. And now, lying here on the couch, surrounded by warmth and touch, I feel none of the regret I thought I might. My eyes remain shut, and with every wave of pleasure, I find myself transported to another place. A place that isn't this room, but something far more vivid and beautiful. In my mind's eye, I see colors I can't describe, shifting and swirling like an artist's palette coming alive. The touches around me blend seamlessly into this imagined world, painting a picture that's both intimate and surreal. The atmosphere here is intoxicating. There's no judgment, no awkwardness. Only a gentle understanding that everyone is here for the same reason, to escape, to connect, to feel. Every movement is deliberate, every touch skilled and professional. These people know what they're doing, and they do it with a kind of artistry that leaves me breathless. For the first time in months, my thoughts are quiet. The weight of my fight with him, the doubts, the fears, they're gone. All I feel is the rhythm of the moment, the hands tracing across my skin, and the buzz that lingers in every fiber of my being. This is exactly what I needed. I was still lost in the haze, my body humming with the buzz of the moment. My eyes remained shut, sealing me in the world of warmth and touch that had overtaken everything else. I didn't want to leave this space. Not yet. Then I felt something warm and wet land on my face. A startled gasp caught in my throat, but I didn't open my eyes. It must have been someone nearby being careless, spilling something, Mayonnaise, maybe. I brushed it off quite literally with the back of my hand, not letting it pull me out of the rhythm I was in. Moments later, I felt a hand, light, tentative, brush over my pelvis, stroking in slow, deliberate movements. My body shivered involuntarily, but I stayed still, letting the sensation wash over me. It wasn't intrusive, just curious, like a question posed without words. Then came something different. A soft, rhythmic tapping against me, almost playful. I tried to ignore it, sinking further into the couch, letting my mind drift to that imagined world of color and light. The energy in the room was too intoxicating for me to pull myself out of it. Minutes passed. The rhythm of the party carried on around me, muted yet persistent. But then a sharp, unpleasant smell broke through the haze. Something sour, almost rotten. My nose wrinkled, and for the first time, doubt crept in. I hesitated, but finally I opened my eyes. What I saw made me freeze. An older man, 50, maybe 60, was standing alarmingly close to me. His face was lined with years. His expression a strange mix of eagerness and nonchalance. He looked down at me with a crooked smile and said, almost as if he'd forgotten something, "Oh, I almost forgot to take it out." I bolted upright, the shock breaking through my daze. My heart raced, and I couldn't hold back the words that spilled from me. "Who let him in?" I shouted, my voice cutting through the air. Heads turned, but no one seemed to have an answer, or maybe they just didn't care. I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed my dress and stumbled toward the bathroom, my feet carrying me as fast as they could. My skin crawled, and my mind raced, replaying the moment over and over again, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The bathroom door closed behind me with a heavy thud, and I immediately turned on the shower. The water was scalding as it hit my skin, but I didn't care. I scrubbed and scrubbed, trying to rid myself of the invisible traces of that man, the smell, the scene. As the steam filled the small space, I felt a strange warmth in my pelvic area, an unsettling sensation that only added to my growing panic. It was as though something was flowing there, a foreign presence I couldn't explain. My breath quickened, fear gripping me tightly as I pressed my back against the cold tile wall. "What is this?" I whispered to myself, the words trembling on my lips. The shower wasn't enough to wash away the feeling. It clung to me like a weight I couldn't shed, and I stood there for what felt like an eternity, letting the water pour over me, willing it to take my fear with it. But no amount of scrubbing or heat could undo what had just happened. I felt small, fragile, and exposed, like the boundaries I'd trusted here had been breached in the worst possible way. As soon as I stepped out of the shower, my mind was racing. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, not even bothering to dry my hair properly. My destination was clear, the pharmacy. A fear I couldn't quite articulate had taken hold of me, and the thought of leaving anything to chance terrified me. The cold night air bit at my skin as I hurried along the dimly lit streets. My thoughts swirled uncontrollably. What if I get pregnant? The question played over and over in my head, like a relentless drumbeat. By the time I reached the pharmacy, my chest was tight, and my hands shook as I reached for the box of emergency contraceptives. At home, I tore the box open, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The instructions were clear. One pill now, another later. But I wasn't thinking rationally, I just wanted to be sure. I swallowed 2 pills, convinced that doubling the dose would somehow double my safety. Moments later, my stomach turned violently. A wave of nausea crashed over me, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I began to vomit. The sickness was relentless, each heave leaving me weaker and more panicked. It wasn't just the physical reaction, it was the fear, the regret, the overwhelming weight of what I'd done. I slumped onto the cold tile floor, tears streaming down my face as I clutched my knees to my chest. "What have I done?" I whispered to myself. I couldn't shake the thought that this was the first sign of something I wasn't ready for. The hours crept by, each one heavier than the last. Sleep eluded me as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my body trembling with exhaustion and dread. When the first rays of sunlight spilled through the window, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers. At the hospital, the sterile smell and bright lights felt like a harsh interrogation of my choices. The nurse's gentle questions only deepened my shame, but I answered honestly, recounting the events of the previous night. The doctor listened carefully, her expression calm and non-judgmental. After an exam and some tests, she sat across from me, her tone reassuring. "You're not pregnant," she said. "What you're experiencing is likely food poisoning, combined with stress and heightened emotions. Your body's response is normal, given everything." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel lighter. But the relief was short-lived. The weight of what I'd done, what I'd been part of, still lingered in my chest. By the time night fell again, I found myself making an impulsive decision. I couldn't leave things the way they were, couldn't let the fear and shame define me. I decided to go back to the swing party. Maybe it was reckless, but I wanted to reclaim something. Control, perhaps, or maybe just a sense of normalcy. When I arrived, the house was the same as the night before, its warm light spilling onto the manicured lawn like an invitation. I stepped inside, the familiar hum of music and conversation greeting me. The atmosphere was as intoxicating as ever, pulling me in, urging me to let go. And then I saw him, standing near the edge of the room, with a glass in hand and an expression I couldn't quite read, was my boyfriend. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt. He hadn't seen me yet, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Questions and emotions collided in my mind, each one more urgent than the last. What was he doing here? Had he been coming to these parties all along? Did he know I'd be here tonight? My heart pounded as I stood frozen, unsure whether to confront him or flee. I couldn't stay there. My heart felt like it was about to shatter, and the walls of the house seemed to close in on me. Without saying a word, I turned and walked out. The cool night air hit my face, but it did nothing to soothe the storm raging inside me. When I got home, the tears came almost instantly. They weren't soft or silent. They were loud, choking sobs that filled the empty space around me. I kept saying it over and over, as if the words would make it hurt less. He's a cheating fool. I hate him. I hate him. The irony stung. I had come to the party seeking release, but what I found was a deeper kind of pain. To see him there, at that place, made me feel like everything between us had been a lie. My emotions spiraled, and for hours I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy numbness in my chest. I couldn't stay in this cycle of pain. It was breaking me. So I made the decision. I packed my things, carefully folding clothes into my bag while my mind replayed everything that had happened over the last few days. By mid-morning I was gone. Now let's fast forward to today. It's been 18 days since that night. 18 long days of reflection, healing, and trying to find my footing again. I'm not pregnant, thank God. The doctor's reassurance has held true, and physically I'm fine. But emotionally, that's a different story. Looking back, I realize how much of this was a chain reaction, a series of impulsive decisions fueled by anger and heartbreak. I went to that swing party because I wanted to escape, to drown out my pain. But what I found there was a different kind of chaos. And here's what I want to say. Never go to swing parties because of emotions. Don't let a moment of vulnerability lead you somewhere you might regret. I nearly walked away with consequences I wasn't ready for. Consequences that could have changed my life forever. I wrote this story so you could hear it, so you could learn from it. Take it as a cautionary tale, a funny yet sobering memory that I'll carry with me. Value yourself, your body, and your emotions. Don't let a fleeting desire or a burst of anger dictate your choices. I wouldn't recommend this path to anyone. It's one of those things that might seem adventurous or freeing in the moment but leaves you with a weight you didn't expect. So laugh at the absurdity of it all if you want, but remember the lesson. And as for me, I've learned mine.